Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our 5th episode of Tech Talks. I'm Danny Burnett.
I'm Nick DeMars.
And so today we're going to be talking about router bits, but before we jump into that, we actually have a question from Eric Davis. I'm going to go ahead and get that going. His question was, would love to join live, but I have another meeting. Totally understand. That's the reason why we have it to where you can watch it later. You don't just have to watch it live. Could you cover flexible mesh abrasives versus classic loop abrasives for hook support? Most of our accessories will have a flexible hook adhesive for support. Of particular interest, I am looking to reduce heat and residue buildup that may shorten the lifespan of the hook. I will look forward to the reply and feel free to reach out to me. Eric, man, that's a great question. So for this right here, I'm going to be looking at our CleanNet. So that is our mesh material that we have. And I get what you're saying. You know, for the heat buildup, you're going to have that a lot more with the mesh. And it's just because you've got pretty much like mesh is just screen. So you've got screen and then grid on top of that right there, and the glue is obviously what's holding it together, but you have all this extra area. So that heat that you're transferring up is going to the hooks. And so a lot of times on your pads, you're actually going to, you know, it can melt your hooks or burn your hooks up. For us, what we do is we actually use an interface pad. So it'll be hook on one side, loop on the other. So you apply this directly to your actual pad, and then you can worry about burning these hooks up. You don't have to worry about burning your own hooks up. And so these are a lot less expensive definitely a lot less expensive compared to actually buying a new pad every time. So this is what we'll do is an interface pad to go for it. So feel free to reach out to us, you know, to be able to get those. Like I said, for this right here, burning these up, these little hooks up, a lot less expensive than actually going through different kinds of backing pads for that.
So what kind of forms do these materials come in? I know we've got the discs, but what else can we do with them?
Oh, okay. So for these right here, we can do them in sheets, we can do them in disc, and we can do these in rolls as well. So if you're doing like fileboard sand or something like that, you can put these on there as well. When you're looking at CleanNet, you're really looking, hopefully you've got a vacuum system. And if you don't have that, you know, what you can do is you can peel it off the backing pad, blow it out, and then put it back to it. So whenever you were talking about that buildup, Eric, what it is, you can just peel off that, blow out that backing, or excuse me, blow out the CleanNet, and then go back to it. A lot of people think that whenever it's loaded up that you can't keep using it, that it's pretty much all gone. That's really not the case. So for people that don't have a vacuum, definitely just taking it off, blowing it off, and putting it back on there. You will still have all that grain and everything for it. But yeah, so such a great question on that. All right, so for this 5th episode, we're going to jump in and talk about router bits and how are they made. So we've got a series of questions for you.
Okay.
You, my man Nick, you are the expert, the man, the myth, the legend when it comes to router bits here. We do have a series of questions for you. I hope you're ready.
We shall find out. Let's fire away.
All right, first question we've got. What size replacement bearing do I need to get for my flush trim bit?
And that is a great question. Actually, it's a very simple answer. Whatever your cutting diameter is of your flush trim bit, the outside diameter of that bearing needs to match. Because keep in mind, after all, you're trying to flush trim. So wherever that bearing rolls, that's exactly where you want that cutting edge to go.
Oh, okay.
All right. So the 1/2 inch, for instance, cutting diameter needs to have a 1/2 inch outside diameter bearing. Now we do have a picture here of our bearings page on our router bit catalog, and we can get a good example of this. If you look down, you'll see where it says B3, the part number B3 bearing. Well, you'll see that B3 has an outside diameter of 1/2 inch and an inside diameter of 3/16. That outside diameter, of course, is going to match the cutting diameter like I was just talking about.
Okay.
That 3/16 inside is going to allow you to fit it over the little nub where you attach it to the end of the bit.
Okay, awesome. So the way I look at you is, man, your experience with router bits, because you've done this for years, is way up here. Me, I'm about middle of the road guy. So this is a question that I feel like a lot of people that are in my shoes are going to have. What is the difference between a straight and spiral router bit?
We could actually go into this one pretty deeply and talk about some of the ins and outs, and maybe we'll get into some of that later with some future questions. But just to keep it kind of simple at this point, a straight cut router bit is going to basically, like this bit here, is going to basically have a straight piece of carbide.
Okay.
Okay. Where with a spiral cut router bit, it's a solid piece of carbide, For instance, if you have a 1/2 inch bit like this one right here, it's a 1/2 inch bit. It comes from a 1/2 inch piece of stock carbide. And then the cutting edges and everything that goes on with that bit is going to be milled into that 1/2 inch piece.
Okay.
So, you know, solid carbide versus carbide tipped, a straight cut versus a spiral cut. And some of the advantages, like I say, we'll go into that a little bit later. I think we have a question later on that asks about the advantages of a spiral router bit over a straight. So we'll save that for later on.
Oh, you got it. All right. So our third question we've got, I've seen bits with coatings on them. How does this affect the performance?
Due to modern technology, we have another picture.
All right.
So this picture here is going to show you our 2 coatings that we have here at Klingspor, which are the chroma and the zircon coatings, okay? So what these coatings do, you take an already quality router bit. This is already quality carbide right here. You take an already quality router bit, you put this coating on. It does a number of things for this router bit, okay? So number one, it makes the edge that much sharper. Okay. This coating is super hard. Just to give you an idea of how hard the coating is once it's completely on there and dried, stainless steel has a Vickers hardness rating of 120 Vickers. Okay. This particular coating, this chroma coating, has a Vickers rating of 4,500.
Wow.
So it's by and large way above and beyond what stainless steel would be. So it increases the hardness, but the best thing about these coatings is they're a nanoceramic coating. And so once they go on, the lubricity or the slickness or slipperiness of that particular coating is added to that bit, and it reduces the heat. And you know, if you know anything about carbide, you know that carbide is brittle because it's so hard. That's the way it is with just about any material. But what the heat reduction does is reduces the capability to chip or to wear a lot. And once that heat is gone, it extends the life of the bits anywhere from 2 to 4 times the life of a standard uncoated bit.
Holy cow, that's a big deal.
That's a
That's
huge deal. And so we have, like I say, we have the chroma and the zircon. You're probably looking at that picture right now. And the chroma coating is a little more suited to plastics and foams and stuff like that. The zircon coating works better with non-ferrous metals like aluminum, copper, brass, things like that. And now keep in mind though, that both these bits, for the most part, are pretty much interchangeable. It's just one is a little more suited to one material while the other is a little more suited to the other.
Okay. That's interesting. That's just weird that a coating can do that. Like
Yeah,
that's
amazing.
that's so cool to me. All right. So we have another question for you, which we're going to have a bunch today for you. What is the difference between a round over bit and a beading bit?
And here again, we have a nice picture for reference. So what we're looking at here is a cutaway picture of a round over cut and a beading cut. Okay, so you can see the round over cut just basically rounds a square edge. Like if it were right here, we just round this square edge of the wood.
Okay.
Where with a beading cut, if you take that round over, let's go this direction. If you take that round over and you sink a little bit deeper, you put a little step in there before you get the round portion.
Okay.
So if you take the bearing off that round over bit and you put a smaller bearing on there, well now you sink it a little deeper. You've got a step, a round, and then a step. That round portion in between those 2 steps is called a bead.
Okay.
And that's where the beading comes in. So basically a round over bit and a beading bit are pretty much the same except you've changed out the bearing for a smaller bearing. And you can see in these pictures how the cut looks. Like I say, you've got the one rounded section and then you've got the section that's got a step, round, step, and that would be the bead.
Oh, okay. All right. So next question I've got for you, what is a compression bit? So I feel like I'm asking you what different kinds of bits are. So we'll go with it. What is a compression bit?
Well, when you're talking solid carbide spiral bits, you're looking at basically 3 different configurations. You're going to have, based upon which way the spiral's going, you're going to have an up cut, you're going to have a down cut, and then you're going to have an up-down cut. A compression bit is an up-down cut. So let me explain the up and down cut first so we can understand the compression a little better.
Okay.
The up cut, if you're cutting, say for instance, thin material, is going to cut the material in an upward motion. So what that's going to do is that's going to leave a clean cut on the bottom edge of the workpiece. Okay? With the down cut, it's just exactly the opposite. It's cutting downward, so it's going to leave a clean cut on the top edge of the workpiece.
Okay.
Now the downside to going with just an upcut or just a down cut is with an upcut, you're going to get just a little bit of fraying along the edge of the top of the workpiece.
Okay.
And then vice versa for the down cut, a little bit of fraying on the bottom edge. The cool thing about a compression bit is a compression bit has a down cut for most of the bit, except for the last 3/8 of an inch. That last 3/8 of an inch has an upcut. So you're getting the down cut motion, you're getting the upcut motion, so that's going to give you a clean cut on both the top and the bottom edges of the workpiece. Now, we do have another type of a compression bit, and I believe that's involved in the next question. But one thing we want to take a look at is that feeds and speeds are critical for these spiral bits. And we've got a video to show you here that will explain just exactly what we're talking about there. When using a CNC router in your manufacturing process, there are a number of settings that need to be adjusted to optimal levels to achieve a smooth and efficient cutting operation. Two of the settings that are very important in this process are the feed rate and the spindle speed, commonly referred to as feed and speed. So what do these terms actually mean? The feed rate is a measurement of the distance in a specified amount of time that the router bit travels while cutting the workpiece, expressed in inches per minute or millimeters per second. The formula to find feed rate is speed in RPMs times the number of flutes times the chip load in inches per tooth. The speed, or spindle speed, is the count of how many times the spindle revolves or rotates in 1 minute of time, hence the term revolutions per minute, or RPM. Another factor we will need to determine the proper feed rate along with the spindle speed is the chip load per tooth. The term chip load per tooth refers to the size of the chip that is produced as a result of one cutting edge making an optimal cut on the workpiece. These measurements are usually expressed in inches per tooth, or IPT. With the chip load and the recommended spindle speed supplied by the bit manufacturer, the only piece of the puzzle that is missing is the number of flutes on a specific bit. A flute is an individual cutting edge on a router bit. Some bits will have one flute, while others will have 2 or more. Usually the bit manufacturer will supply the recommended spindle speed along with the chip load range, or low end and high end chip load. One side note, not all router bits are created equal. Each bit manufacturer will provide chip loads that are specific to their bit. Also take into consideration the capabilities of your specific machine. Just like the bits they use, not all CNC machines are created equal. To begin with, you will figure the low end and the high end feed rates based upon the 2 chip loads, and then find the point directly in the middle between the 2. Let's illustrate this. Let's assume that the recommended speed is 18,000 RPMs and that our chosen bit has 2 flutes. 18,000 times 2 equals 36,000. Our next step is to multiply the product of our first calculation by the recommended chip loads. If we look at the chart shown here, you can see that the chip load is going to vary based upon the cut diameter or tool diameter of the bit and the direction of the cut. So let's do the math. 36,000 times 0.007, which is the low end of the chip load, equals 252 inches per minute. This gives us the low end of the feed rate. Now let's calculate it again to get the high end. 36,000 times 0.009, which is the high end of the chip load, equals 324 inches per minute. The feed rate should be between 252 and 324 inches per minute. Choosing a good starting point in the middle, we would start at 288 inches per minute. Now, it must be stated that these calculations provide a good starting point for the feed rate. However, keep in mind that most router bit manufacturers engineer their bits for industrial use. Some smaller hobby machines cannot perform at the higher feed rates due to smaller stepper motors or cheaper build components. You may need to play with the formula to dial in your feeds and speeds, to maintain the optimal chip load or as close as possible. And remember that it's always best to use a high quality bit like a Klingspor router bit.
Such a great video. You know, when you're looking at feeding speed, from what I know about it, which, like I said, you are the master for this stuff, that is probably one of the most important things when you're talking about router bits.
And it may sound complicated, but really it's not. I mean, it's just a matter of knowing your bit, knowing how many flutes you have, knowing what RPMs it's supposed to run at, and knowing the 2 chip loads that you want to figure just like it showed in the video. It's a fairly simple calculation.
It is, you know, and when you look at, you know, because you wrote it out for me many times for, like, to me it looks like a big old algorithm trying to figure it out. But, you know, once you get into it and you explain it, it does make so much more sense. So for everybody watching, if you've got questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us at techtalk@klingspor.com. Send us your questions. We'll do everything we can to get them on here. If not, then we will email you the answers. So we will get your question, I promise you that.
Absolutely.
All right, so another question I've got for you. What is a mortise compression bit?
Okay, so we talked about the compression bit being a down cut until you reach the bottom 3/8 of the bit, at which point it's an upcut. What a mortise compression does is reduces the size of that upcut down to 1/4 inch. What this allows you to do is this gives you a nice mortise kind of section along the bottom edge, specifically for things like a melamine. Melamine chips really easy.
Okay.
And this mortise compression bit works really good on things that can chip fairly simply. So this mortise compression bit is of a more specialized version of the compression bit for you know, those kind of items.
Oh, okay. I just have to say it. So, you know, when you're describing these, all the thing I can think of is dance moves. You got up, down, you've got beats going. And so to me, you know, that's where my mind goes every now and then. If you see me, just like, man, that's cool.
I'm not a dancer, so I can't picture that.
I'm not either. That's the bad part. What is a spool board bit and how is it used?
In order to answer that question, I'm going to have to explain really what a spoil board is to begin with.
Okay.
So if you picture this table as a CNC machine, okay, and in order to protect the very tabletop for the bits that are cutting through the material, we want to put something up here that's going to protect it from cutting it into our machine surface.
Okay.
So what we do is we take a sheet of MDF, medium density fiberboard, and we put it on the surface here. That is our spoil board. What that means is as we're cutting other materials, we're spoiling that board. We're ruining the thing. But after you use that a certain number of times, your surface gets to be uneven, it's not holding down properly, and in some way you've got to flatten out all the grooves and stuff you put in there. That's what this spoil board bit is for, okay? If you're looking at the picture of this thing, it comes in pretty large sizes, and so this bit goes back and forth and basically just completely flattens the surface of your spoil board to a brand new surface again. Now the cool thing about these is they have replaceable cutters, so you can get them in 2, 3, or 4 cutter head variations that have 2, 3, or 4 wings, and each one of those wings has a little square piece of carbide on the very tip of it, and that square piece of carbide is what does your cutting. And the neat thing about it is once that's worn out, you loosen that screw up, you turn that piece of carbide, and you've got a brand new cutting surface.
That's cool.
So you've got 4 possible cutting surfaces on each one of those little pieces of carbide around that bit. But you'll see these used not only in the spoil board setting, but also flattening pieces of wood for like maybe an epoxy river table or something like that. They use that for that also.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. All right, so our next question comes from Coleman. Coleman, I want to reach out to you and say thank you so much for your questions. I feel like we've had a question from you every time. We appreciate you following us, and you know, keep it up, man. If you've got questions, we're here for you. So thank you so much for reaching out to us and giving us these amazing questions you've been getting us. So this one I feel like is a very open question. Specialty CNC bits, what do I need to know before I buy?
As I've said before, you have to kind of begin with the end in mind for this, okay? So you know what kind of workpiece you're working on. You know what you want to accomplish with it. Okay, so you have to stop and think, well, for what I'm doing, do I want to upcut or a down cut? Do I want a clean cut on the top edge or do I want a clean cut on the bottom edge?
Okay.
Am I pulling some of the material out of a pocket or a hole that I've cut halfway through my workpiece? There's a lot of thinking that has to go into this before you can really decide which bit you need. Am I going to want something that's going to give me some rounded edges? Am I going to want something that's going to carve, that's going to do the rough carving, and then maybe switch to a carving liner that's going to do the fine details in my rough carving?
Okay.
A lot of different considerations there. Do I want a compression bit? Am I cutting all the way through the material and I want a clean cut on the top and the bottom edge? You also want to consider the capabilities of your machine, the recommended RPMs and feed rates and stuff of the bits. Like I say, you have to kind of begin with the end in mind and work backwards from there to really decide exactly what you want to purchase.
Oh, okay. So with that being said, for y'all watching, if you like you said, if you know what you want your end project to be, send us an email. Email us at techtalk@klingsport.com. Email us that, hey, here's a picture of kind of what I'm looking for. Do you have a bit that can do this kind of thing? Reach out to us and we can definitely help you along that way. So any pictures you've got that you need to send our way, it's like, hey, I need this, or I'm looking for this kind of image, reach out to us and we'll see what we can do. We'll definitely follow up to see what kind of machine you've got and do those kind of things. But the more information you give us about what your end product to look like, the better off we can really assist you for it. So, but don't hesitate to reach out to us and we will do the best we can to get you to that situation. Probably a weird way to word that, to get you to that finish you're looking for. Yeah. All right. Coleman, again, man, thank you so much for your question. It's appreciated. All right. Should I use an upcut or downcut spiral bit?
Now, when you ask that question, I automatically think of guitar manufacturers.
Okay.
Because as they're milling out the bodies of their electric guitars, for instance, I don't know what the thickness is. It's 1.5 inches, 1 3/4, maybe even 2 inches. I don't know. But they're cutting out hollow spots in the bodies of those electric guitars for the pickups, for the wires to run through, for the volume, tone, and bass and treble pots, all those different things. They've got to have a hollowed out area in the body of that guitar. And in most instances, those things are going to be covered by a plate or a pick guard or some decorative piece that goes over top of all that. So in a lot of instances, they might not want a spiral down cut bit because they really don't care if the cut is clean on the top edge or not. It's going to be covered. So they might be looking at an upcut bit. The advantage to an upcut bit is, in a lot of instances, it'll pull a lot of that material up out of the pocket that you've just cut and expel it onto the surface or into the suction or whatever the case may be. Now, in some instances, they're cutting pockets in material and they want that clean cut on the top edge because that top edge is going to show. So they'll use that down cut bit. Okay? And a lot of times, if they're drilling holes straight through the material, they'll do the same thing. They want that top edge to be clean, and they just plunge that bit all the way through the material, get that nice clean cut on the top edge.
Oh, okay.
So there's your ins and outs of the up and the down cut spiral, and then like we talked about with the compression bit, you get the best of both worlds.
Okay, that's interesting. All right, so this question right here that I'm about to ask you. To me, this is. I'm just going to ask you to and see. I just want to see the answers for it. How good is the carbide in your bits?
I did a little bit of studying on this, and you can actually get into this fairly deep also. Before I tell you the designations of our carbide, I want to explain that carbide is not necessarily rated by how good or how bad it is, per se, as far as the designations that it's given, but it's more so of what each individual style of carbide is positioned for. So in one particular type of carbide, you might want a really sharp, clean cut. Other types of carbide, you just might want to hog out a lot of material. Okay, so we use what's called C2 and C3 carbide. As these carbides progress in this number system, C2, C3, C4, the grain changes size in the carbide. And the C2 and the C3 carbide seem to be just about the perfect size to obtain a clean cutting edge and maintain a good long life because of the size of the grain that's in that carbide. Okay? So we've got C2 and C3 carbide. Now it's also referred to as micro grain carbide. So that tells us that the grains in that carbide are really small. That's what allows us to get a good sharp cutting edge. Now, the smaller you go with that carbide, the more brittle it's going to become. So there again, C2 and C3 seem to be the perfect spot for cutting edges on router bits, on saw blades, things like this. Okay, something that really needs to slice clean but yet last a long time. Still have that toughness that's needed for something like that. And something else that's evident in our carbide is less cheap filters. I know with some of the bits you can get from different places around the world, you can get, you can get an inexpensive router bit, but the carbide in those router bits is going to have a lot of cheap filters in it. There are cheap fillers in it. And those cheap fillers are going to allow that carbide to start chipping away a lot quicker. See, a carbide doesn't really wear as far as that edge is concerned. It doesn't really round off. It just develops microchips, okay? And so another thing you're going to see about our bits here is that they have the extra thick carbide. If you buy, go out into the retail setting and you buy some bits from, some well-known retail stores, you will find out when compared to our bits that the carbide is a lot thinner. And when I say thinner, if you look at the carbide in ours, that's almost 1/8 of an inch right there.
Okay.
A carbide in some others will be 1/16 of an inch. What this allows you to do is this allows you to get a lot more sharpenings out of our router bits. So I know in North Carolina, in different parts of the United States, it works kind of differently, but in North Carolina we have some men that do this for a living. They have a van and they'll drive around from wood shop to wood shop and collect saw blades. They'll collect router bits, they'll take them home, they'll sharpen them, dip them in the little wax coating that protects them, and then bring them back. And you'll have basically a brand new router bit all over again.
Oh, okay.
And we also have a sharpening program for the spiral router bits we can hook you up with too. So if you got some spiral router bits that need to be sharpened, now keep in mind, the more you sharpen these, the less cutting diameter you're going to have. So if it's a thing about accuracy and needing that extra cutting diameter, you don't want to sharpen them too many times. But you can get them sharpened through a program that we have available. But that basically talks about our carbide and our router bits. It's just about second to none in the industry. I mean, our carbide is some really top quality stuff, and our router bits have actually really done well out in the market. I mean, really, really well. They're known all over the United States, maybe even all over the world.
Okay. Well, I was going to say my next question was going to be why buy our router bits, but I feel like you just answered that and nailed it on the head. One thing definitely for your viewers out there, you can see the excitement he's got for it. I mean, this guy knows his stuff, and so do us a favor. If you don't buy CleanSport router bits, give them a shot.
Absolutely.
Honestly, for us, we do have that paid trial, but we also normally have a promo going. Do we kind of get any insight on any promos?
Yeah, as a standard, we've got a buy one, get one free promo going on. So if you buy one router bit, you get a second one free, and you can mix and match them. So, you can buy a round over and mix and match that bad boy with a flush trim if you want to. It just varies. One thing I did want to mention too when we're talking about the quality of the router bits is the bodies on our router bits are made from a solid blank of hardened steel. Now, I know in a lot of instances with some of the cheaper router bits you can get your hands on, the bodies are made from cast material. And you might know as well as I do, the cast material is just not as strong as a hardened piece of steel. Sure. And so you can see with our example here, the milling process starts out with a blank. You mill a basic mushroom shape, you put the wings in, you braze the carbide on. And when I say braze, what I'm referring to is they heat both metals up almost to the point of melting. Okay. And those fuse together, and once that happens, they fill that in with a particular brazing material. In this case, it's 1/2 pure silver. Okay. And then once that's done, you see the rest of the milling process goes on, and toward the very end, they add the bearing, and they do a final buffing and sharpening of the bit itself.
Okay. Good deal. Well, to let y'all know, that is going to wrap it up for us pretty much. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us at techtalk@cleansport.com. That's going to wrap up episode 5. So our next episode 6, obviously, is going to be on pneumatic power tools featuring CleanSport Spartan random orbit sanders. So that is going to be our main guy, Luke Dombrowski, is going to be the one showing off, pretty much that's his product line, so showing off some orbital sanding. And that's it for us. Thank you from Danny Burnett.
Nick DeMars, good day.